as I rang the buzzer belonging to today's interviewee,
Katie and Izzy,
and headed up 2 flights of stairs.
Lovely, see you in a minute.
Much to my producer's dismay,
This is first floor, we're going to second floor now.
Oh, good. Nice little workout for the legs today.
I had no inkling that the money problem I thought I would be tackling would turn into something more. Poppy, not her real name, got in touch with me as she's fed up with her well-off family and friends, leaving her behind when it comes to money. She welcomes us in warmly,
Hi.
showing us around her flat, which she owns, including her pride and joy, a tall glass cabinet with various designer handbags on display. Poppy clearly has a penchant for posh purses. This was my first clue that there was more to this story. After a quick slice of homemade cake and a cuppa in the lounge, where another handbag was hung on the wall in pride of place, we got down to the reason she contacted me. Poppy is crippled with money jealousy, and I'm here to help. Welcome to Money Confidential with me, Katie Morley. As the Telegraph's financial agony aunt, I'm hitting the road to hear directly from you and the awkward everyday money problems affecting your life and relationships. Each episode, I'm also joined by a financial expert in their field to help solve these dilemmas, as well as a Telegraph columnist offering their thoughts. Today, we tackle one of the 7 deadly sins, envy. We rarely talk about it, but being a green-eyed monster over what other people have is actually very normal. Be honest, who hasn't eyed up the neighbour's brand new Range Rover, or caught a glimpse of a friend's sparklier engagement ring? Maybe spent a bit too long in someone else's bathroom, lathering up with Jo Malone hand cream and thinking, "Wow, how much did this squirt cost?" Enter Poppy, not her real name, who got in touch with me about this very matter. Poppy struggles with money, while richer siblings of hers go skiing and don't bother bringing her along. Poppy finds the wealth gap awkward at best and painful at worst. Having enjoyed a quick cuppa, she starts spilling the tea. To keep Poppy safe, her words are voiced by an actor. Can you pinpoint the first time that you felt jealous or envious of someone else's possessions or financial situation?
Yeah, I think the first time I became aware of it was when I was at university, like other girls going back home to like Barbados or where they lived. And again, whereas other people were dining in this fancy, beautiful restaurant, I was the waitress at the restaurant. They were just laughing and saying, "Oh, is it you?" And I was like serving them, being really uncomfortable in this crappy black and white uniform. That was bad. I was just thinking, God, this is shit.
How do you think that your relationship with money has impacted your relationships with your friends and family?
I have really weak relationships with my siblings. I feel like I was always excluded a little bit. I remember when I was like 24 or something, we were in my sister's house and she gave my other sister a Tiffany bracelet. And I was like, wow, that's beautiful. And she just looked at me and said, yeah, she's been going through a hard time. And then I got a pair of red tracksuit bottoms. And then I felt something change, I think. I thought this is going to go on where I'm not there and I'm not seeing it. And they kind of closed off the holidays so that I couldn't find out about it. Like I hear about it, like they've got houses abroad and stuff. And I've been invited like once or twice. And my boyfriend at the time was like, they're not inviting you. I can't afford a holiday. I haven't been on holiday for about 7 years. And that kind of hurts because I haven't really got anyone to go on holiday with. And also because I haven't got any money. I've never got any money. So that's difficult when you see the wealth and you just get a little inkling of it on a group chat or something.
What about friends? Does it affect your social life?
So in terms of like friends, I just discovered a few years ago that if you haven't got disposable income, then you can't really go out. You can't really do leisure. So I don't really have any leisure activities. Like maybe people would go out at night or like a theme park or something. I can't really afford that. And the other day I said to a friend, let's go out for brunch. I thought it would be nice. And then I just thought, oh God, I can't afford it. I'll have to go there. That'll be the petrol. And even though the menu's like £11 or something or £14, I'm just going to sit there looking at her with how much money she's got, buying all the things she wants. And it's just going to be a bit painful for me. One friend, she was just telling me about her gold jewellery and how she goes back to like South Africa and she's going to make some beautiful new bracelet in this special design. And I said, oh, let me see that brochure. So that looks nice. Yeah. How much is that? And she wouldn't. She said it's just very expensive. So they talk to me like I'm a child, like I can't deal with numbers. That was just such a put down for me. So again, it was just that, like, wow, you can't afford it. Don't even ask. I get that quite a lot.
So you feel kind of put down and it makes you feel bad inside, does it? How else do you feel?
Some friends can, like, rub my nose in it. I don't know if they mean to or if it's just cruel. So when I'm usually broke, like really, really broke, I feel really dark, like a really dark place, and scared and embarrassed and ashamed, because you can't really talk to anyone about it as it's such a shameful thing.
If you could think of like the top things that you've been the most jealous of, what would they be?
I mean, it's things like houses, like decent bathrooms. I haven't had anything repaired or changed really since I got here 18 years ago.
Do you think that if you were able to get more of a handle on your day-to-day budgeting and make things work a little bit better for you, that these feelings might subside?
I think they might, yeah. And if I could have a little budget for small things like repairs or small things like redecorating.
Do you have a regular savings pot or anything like that?
Sadly not.
And how are you controlling your banking at the moment?
I like checking my bank account, sometimes during the night, 2-3 times a night, through online banking, sometimes 20 times a day, worrying, anxious about what's going in, what's going out.
At this point in her story, I'll admit I was confused. I felt sorry for Poppy and the way she'd been treated, and admired her for reaching out to me about such a potentially shaming topic. And yet, amongst all this talk of going broke, I couldn't help but think of her wall of handbags, all designer, all very expensive. How can she be jealous when she's got thousands of pounds worth of accessories hanging up? But as the morning went on, Poppy opened up and it became clear that her spending habits were very much entwined with her mental health.
About 2 years ago, I was identified with ADHD, and I'm actually being tested at the moment for autism. To be honest, it was a bit murky after that, and it's not been great. It's not like in the magazines where it's like, oh, well, there's a magic moment and everyone's going to understand. It hasn't really been like that at all. But I've identified recently that my impulsivity has been with me all my life. I think I can go back to the age of 28. And I was off sick for a while, and as soon as the money came in, I used to call it washing machine money. I'd burn it within a day or two, or go down to Bond Street, and then forever I was asking the bank for an overdraft. It was awful. So I will go without food or anything so I can buy a certain bag. I have phases, and amazingly enough, when I want to get something, I get it, but probably at the expense of my finances. I'm very determined. So 5 years ago it was bags. And then I moved on recently to skincare. And so I've got subscriptions to all these like beauty boxes. And when they come in and it's on my doorstep, I'm so happy. And I've cleaned out all my food cupboards just to make way for the beauty products. And then I'll keep saying to myself, I'm going to resell them. And I never can. Like with ADHD, part of it is like procrastination. People call it disorganization. It's just a different way of doing things. And so I can't do the things that would be good for me or that I meant to do. So I never sell them, and I just end up a bit like Miss Havisham, all this stuff around her and she can't move.
Talk me through the journey of being really focused on that thing, achieving it and getting it, but then realising afterwards that you haven't got enough food to eat.
For some things like bags, I'm very, very happy. And I would like not die for one, but it's that idea, right? But I don't always make the connection, or it goes too quickly for me to make connections between the splurge as soon as I get payday and the longest month of my life feels like 6 weeks when I haven't got any money. And then I do regret it, and every month I say it's going to be different, and it's not.
Is that regret creeping in, would you say?
Earlier and earlier now, about 5 days after, it feels really horrendous, really, really depressing, really, really low, so bad. So, I've gone to food banks and stuff occasionally. There's never anything in the fridge for weeks.
At this moment, the penny dropped and Poppy's story became a lot clearer to me. Her problem wasn't just jealousy, but also impulsive spending, money management, and that very relatable rollercoaster high of splashing the cash on payday and coming crashing back down to earth soon after. Have you told your bank
Oh, your credit card provider that you have ADHD diagnosed?
Yeah, it's been really interesting, that one. They've actually been quite good. They will speak to me slower. They'll be really nice to me too.
And what about paying bills? Are you on top of your bills generally?
Yeah, amazingly enough, I kind of am. I'm just worried about I've got like 10 years left to pay my mortgage off. It's like 80 grand. So this is the magic thing you're going to help me with. It's 10 grand a year.
So really your goal, Poppy, is to get that mortgage paid off and manage your budget in order to make that happen.
That's right. Yeah, totally.
And would you be willing to try to give up the bags and the makeup?
That I totally would.
Thanks so much to Poppy for inviting us to her house and serving up a delicious lemon cake alongside a rather sour financial confession. I felt she was brave to share her story and to be so candid, particularly around some painful home truths that she'd kept to herself for years. Her story is a relatable one. Who hasn't overspent on payday and instantly felt regret? This is what we're all about on Money Confidential. Real people, real problems, and real talk. To help tackle the tornado of ADHD, compulsive spending and financial envy, we have not one, but two financial experts armed with practical tips and take-home advice. But before that, I wanted to share some Telegraph listener thoughts on money envy. These have been shared on our Facebook page and via our podcast email, moneyconfidential@telegraph.co.uk. Pat says, envy of money is a wasted emotion. I work hard and pay my bills, and moaning doesn't make anything better. Well, you're probably right, Pat, but sometimes it's easier said than done. Laura says, not sure it's envy as much as disgust when people act like they are doing something clever because they have money left at the end of the month, when in fact all that has happened is their parents bought them their home. Well, I think there used to be a phrase, check your privilege, which was aimed at people who do exactly this, but clearly not everyone remembers to. What do you think? Is it worth getting riled up about what other people have? Is there anything wrong with spending money and flaunting it? Should family members subsidise those who are less well off? Email me directly or send me a voice note to moneyconfidential@telegraph.co.uk. Now, just around the corner, we have expert opinions and practical tips, as well as a Telegraph commentator, Celia Walden, with her pearls of wisdom for Poppy, and confessing the money habit that annoys her husband, Piers Morgan, the most. Welcome back to Money Confidential. Real people, real problems, real talk. With me, Katie Morley. Joining me down the line to talk about the psychology behind feelings of money jealousy and how we can help tackle this big green monster is money psychotherapist and author of Money on Your Mind, Vicky Reynal. Why do people experience financial envy, and why can it feel so intense sometimes? Are there certain factors going on with some people that might intensify it?
For some people, it's harder to manage than for others. Now, psychoanalysts have traced it back to our early experiences. So we envied our mother for her ability to gratify our needs. And if she did successfully and consistently meet our needs, we can integrate the envy with our experiences of love and gratitude. But if our experiences of good enough mothering were sporadic or insufficient, it can leave us finding it quite hard to manage our envy as adults. So to answer your question, some of us, because of childhood experiences, might experience envy more intensely than others. There's a bit also personality and element to it and some predispositions. You know, some people always see the glass half empty. They always see what's lacking rather than valuing what's there. And that fuels envy because we're focusing on what we don't have and others do have. And I think it can also be about self-esteem, because if you don't feel you have much of anything, then everybody else has more than you.
And look, you've just heard Poppy's experience. Why do you think she's experiencing this feeling so strongly?
I think partly it is because of her ADHD, and some experts attribute kind of an obsessionality to ADHD, which I think can explain why she becomes so focused on this envy, you know, why it gets to her so much. But, you know, we can wonder, why is this kind of her choice of obsession? Why is she obsessing over the money envy? And I think there can be various reasons. We can't know for certain. But one thing I became curious about listening to Poppy's experience of this dynamic with the sisters, in which she sounds both envious and jealous of them. It wasn't just about they have more money than me.
Now that's interesting that you've raised that distinction between money envy and money jealousy, because you say they are two different things, don't you? Can you just explain that?
Yes, it's quite simple. So envy can be summed up as I want what you have, and jealousy can be summed up as I want what you have with them. So envy requires two people, and jealousy requires three, two of which are kind of in competition for the third.
So you think that Poppy is actually suffering from money jealousy, where it's not just money envy, it's not just wanting other people's things, it's feeling jealous of social dynamics going on as well and feeling excluded.
Yes, and I think she uses that word, excluded. It's look at what they have together, look at their relationship with how they share their problems, they go off on holiday together. So I think that jealousy turns into money envy for her, because money represents all sorts of things that these siblings have, and she didn't. She doesn't. And maybe it has to do with the past, Has money become a proxy for the love or the closeness that these siblings have with each other or with a mother? We don't know. But it feels kind of packed with emotions, and these emotions seem to be like what's going on with the sisters.
And what could Poppy do you think, to better control or reframe these feelings of money jealousy?
So I think there's a number of things. Envy is a focus on what we lack. The first thing we can do is shift our attention. So really make an effort in our minds to start focusing on what we have. Fine, the sisters have more money, but I would ask Poppy, what do you have that you value? I think the other way around works too. So when we envy the other, we're focusing on the one thing they have. And we see that often when we compare ourselves to others. We compare ourselves on the one thing that will make us feel bad. And so focusing on the bigger picture, surely they have more money, but there might be other things that they're lacking and that we have and can feel happy and content with. The third tip is to be careful that you're not making this about more than just money. So yes, they might have more money and they can afford a Tiffany's bracelet, but so what? Are you in a way using this to imagine that they're happier? Has it gone beyond money to what money represents? So you see, many people envy the wealthy because they imagine that they're happier. And as a financial therapist, I can tell you that, oh my God, that's not true. So I think it's about what we imagine money gives them rather than the money itself sometimes.
I think it's interesting because Poppy particularly struggles with buying designer handbags, makeup, sort of luxury items. Why do you think that she is drawn to these luxury items at the same time as experiencing this financial jealousy?
Luxury items, particularly designer bags, sometimes become the focus of obsessions, not just for people with ADHD like Poppy, but I think it's because of what they can represent for people. And of course, let's just say that for some, it's about having a beautiful item of high quality, and that's all it is, really. But for many, there's more to it. There's the longing for the status that is associated with a designer bag. People want to portray an image, which maybe is an aspirational image of themselves, of what they'd like to be it successful, wealthy, whatever that is. For other people, it makes them more desirable, or at least that's how it feels. It addresses an inner sense of not being good enough, but maybe, with this bag, I'll look better, I'll be more attractive.
So do you think then, going back to Poppy, that perhaps some of her feelings of money jealousy are really not to do with the money at all? They're maybe to do with the actual relationships themselves?
Well, my experience tells me that that's probably what's going on. She sees her sisters being in relationships and being in a relationship with one another in which there's understanding, there's listening, there's connection, and she sounds lonely. And that's one of the other things that I was going to suggest to Poppy, is to not use her lack of money as a reason not to reach out for friends. And, I don't want to undermine her point that leisure and entertainment is expensive, but we can become friends with our neighbor. We can go for a walk in the park with somebody. These are inexpensive activities that actually give us so much. Being heard, being understood is ultimately what makes people happy, and that's free. Why has money become so important? This is telling us something about her, her lack, and what she perceives in the world as a result of it. So yeah, I do think we need to wonder why she's making money so important. At the end of the day, if that was something that she valued a lot, she might have made a different career choice that was all about making money. So is this about her regrets, about the choices that she made? When we see a problem everywhere around us, it really invites the question, what conflict in us is making us see the world this way?
Such is the size of Poppy's green-eyed monster that we have a second expert on today's Money Confidential. Managing money and ADHD is a challenge, and with ADHD diagnoses in women doubling between 2020 and 2022, I thought it would only be right for me to speak to someone who has both expert knowledge of money management and first-hand experience of ADHD, having been diagnosed with it herself. Claire Seal is author of Real Life Money and 5 Steps to Financial Wellbeing. So we've just heard Poppy's story and she's really bared her soul to us today. Can you relate to some of these money struggles that she was talking about?
Loads of people with ADHD will tell you that this happens in their life. They will have these periodic hyperfixations that then they spend an awful lot of money on, along with general life struggles. Childcare, accommodation on quite a low salary was just a real perfect storm for me, but I don't think I understood that compulsive behaviour and that hyperfixation until I learned about the fact that my brain just works really differently.
In terms of this cycle that Poppy talks about, where the money is coming in and then it's going out on something really big, and then the rest of the month she is hand to mouth struggling to eat, do you have any practical tips on how she can break that cycle?
That cycle is very much in line with the dopamine cycle of having ADHD. One of the things that can work really well for that is just delay tactics. Delay yourself like you were a toddler. I tell myself that I'm allowed to want things. So just accepting that I want it and I'm allowed to have it. And then I genuinely quite often will say to myself, oh yeah, I'll buy one of those one day. And sometimes that is all it takes. But if that's not working in the short term, just saying, I'll buy it tomorrow. And then again, I'll just wait until tomorrow. And sometimes that just gives you enough time for the feeling, that urgent feeling of needing to buy it to pass, because it does pass eventually, and you'll find something else that you want. One thing that lots of people with ADHD find really helpful with their finances is just gamifying it. So having something that makes it fun, something that you can really get your hooks into. So for me, when I was paying off my debt, I just drew out a 10 by 10 grid. So it had 100 squares in it. And I was allowed to colour in a square every time I paid off 1% of my debt, or every time I'd reduced my balance by 1%. It gave me a dopamine hit every time I did it. And it gave me a reason not to add to basket. But there are lots of ways that you can do that. If you're quite digitally minded, there are banking apps and budgeting apps that will replicate that. There's an app where you can save money every time it rains. There are loads of ways to kind of get your brain a bit fired up about the idea of saving money.
Are there any ADHD friendly budgeting or saving tools that you would recommend for her to have a look at to see if she gets on with them?
Auto-saving apps, so sort of Chip and Plum are two that come to mind. One of the things that Poppy was describing was this obsessive checking of her bank balance. You can get budgeting apps like Snoop or MoneyHub where it will deliver your balance to you once a day, and that makes it, I think, easier than not to be logging on and obsessively checking.
How can she best set up a regular savings plan that she can stick to, crucially, in order to achieve her goal?
I think the big thing is because I think a lot of people with ADHD experience this as like you have sort of your rational brain and then there's your executive brain, which is what is impacted by ADHD, just stops functioning as well. And you have this big lapse in judgment quite often. And that's when people tend to sort of press like the F it button, and you can do so much damage just in one impulsive moment. And I think one of the ways that you can use kind of your rational brain to protect yourself against what happens in those moments of executive dysfunction is just to hide the money from yourself. So if she can possibly put it somewhere that she can't access it straight away, an account where she would need to pay a penalty to withdraw, so a fixed term saver. Some bank accounts will allow you to padlock your money, which again is just like another barrier. You can take it off yourself. Another thing to do is kind of enlist the help of an accountability partner.
Where can people find support for this sort of thing?
I would say the forums on Money Saving Expert are great. If you're highly sensitive, they can be a bit sort of tough love. You could come and find me on Instagram, My Frugal Year. I try to moderate my page so that there isn't really any of that. It's supposed to be sort of a real safe place for people to talk about money.
You're listening to Money Confidential with me, Katie Morley. Now, one woman who shares a similar penchant for purses, particularly of the designer variety, is Telegraph columnist and self-confessed shopping addict, Celia Walden. I asked her if she could relate to Poppy's feelings of financial jealousy and envy.
So I was going to make all sorts of jokes about women being incredibly impulsive creatures, because I know I am. And I think there is still a sort of, very, very small element of that. But of course, ADHD does change my view quite a lot. This is not a question of sort of buying a few too many extra things and unnecessary things. It's a full-on an addiction. I really felt for her, and I felt for the situation she found herself in, with so many, and I do think you can say this, with people, but probably more women than men. It's such an emotional business, isn't it? Sort of overspending, and as a therapist would say, it has obviously had a function in terms of soothing her or providing her with the comfort she needs. This idea of these boxes arriving with so many products that she can never possibly use them.
It might not really be about these individual things, might it? As you say, it might be about the serotonin it gives her when she goes on this journey to seek out the handbag, or...
Yes. And I once tried to explain to my husband, who his study is downstairs in the house, my study is upstairs. So it means that he has to deal with all the the steady flow of DHL men bringing things that I then invariably return 99.9% of the time. And it completely infuriates him. And I once explained to him, and I think I only realized myself when I was explaining it, you get 3 rewards for the price of 1 when you, certainly with sort of impulsive online shopping, because you have the reward, the huge serotonin rush, or when you buy it, when you press, purchase, then you get another big kind of zinger when it arrives and you unpack it. And then I actually get a real sense of, I don't know whether you'd call it a rush, but it feels good to then return it. My husband looked at me as if I was completely insane. But I'm sure if she were talking to a therapist about that, this is obviously a habit that has in one way or another been sort of giving her something she needed. And maybe it's about her finding other ways to get those same feelings.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's right. But you've told my producer that you've tried something called urge surfing. What is that?
Yes, I spend half the year in LA where they're very big on urge surfing, which is to literally ride the wave of temptation, whatever it is. So that means don't do that thing that most people do of saying, I mustn't think about this. I mustn't think about this handbag or these products I want to buy. Because as soon as you say that, the other side of your brain says, oh, well, now I really, really want it because you've told me not to think about it. So you're supposed to just go along with it, just let it all and wait. And apparently all urges and all temptation crests at a certain point and then decreases. But I think it's something like sort of 15 minutes for you to...
Really? That's short. That's not too long, is it? It feels like longer in the moment, doesn't it?
It does feel like a very, and you know, any smoker who's ever tried to give up, it feels like that people use it with all sorts of things, with alcohol, with compulsive shopping. It does sometimes help.
It's tough, isn't it, though? Because we all suffer from varying degrees of impulsivity, but there surely has to be some element of personal responsibility here for everyone, don't you think?
I agree, but I also think that our culture has made that very difficult for us. And if you look at, say, you know, my parents, and if you couldn't afford something, you just couldn't have it. There weren't endless ways to get it. And it does feel often as though the devil is everywhere, you know, with the little horns kind of saying, go on, go on. You've got all these different ways of effectively not paying for something immediately. It's understandable that people are spending beyond their means.
I think it's really interesting that you've brought that up, Celia, because the main theme of this episode is money envy. And we've had some really interesting comments in from our Telegraph readers around this topic. And Paul has said, money envy? Not when you understand that the country is built on debt, the Range Rovers, the big houses, the grand holidays, all on lease, easy loans or pay later agreements, and middle class up to their eyeballs and all for Instagram likes. What do you think about that? Do you think he's bang on the money?
I mean, again, it's a very, very different culture. You know, I've got friends who have hired Chanel bags for events, for example. And it is amazing that you can do that for something like, you know, 45 quid for a week, have a brand new Chanel bag. But it matters to them that much that they would do that. And I'm always amazed when I remember talking to a friend of mine who is not in a very well-paid job, but whose girlfriend had said that she wanted, I can't remember what it was, a Gucci bag or something like that. And it was some enormous quantity. It was sort of, you know, £3,000 or something. But he was genuinely going to try and find a way to get it for her birthday.
Why do you think that people are wanting to sort of make it look like they've got all this designer gear or all this wealth when it might not even actually be the case?
Well, I'm sure that social media has given rise to definitely a whole lot of sort of Walter Mitty characters who can effectively invent their lives, because everyone is to a certain extent inventing their lives on Instagram. And I think you can do it more easily than you ever could. But again, it feels as though culture is everything in sort of popular culture is pushing us in that direction.
Yeah, and we've just heard from money psychotherapist Vicky Reynal that having lots of money definitely doesn't correlate to being happy. Yet so many of us find that so hard to believe, and lots of us are experiencing money envy almost on a daily basis.
That money doesn't make you happy thing is a difficult thing, because whilst I've seen firsthand sort of very rich, incredibly unhappy people, it obviously makes life much easier. The difficulties are what grind you down. So if you take those away, it should make you happy, shouldn't it? Probably a sweet spot, which does make you happy, and anything beyond that makes you unhappy.
Vicky also said that sort of being financially dysfunctional yourself and struggling with impulses, a bit like Poppy, can lead to even more extreme, intense feelings of financial envy towards others. Is financial envy something that you've ever experienced at any point?
It hasn't, in my mind, been linked so much to people having lots of money. But I think my most envious years were probably when I was sort of 14, 15, 16, when you're quite insecure anyway. You don't really know who you are yet. Like, I was sent on a French exchange once. The girl was really, really well off and lived in an amazing Paris apartment. And she was beautiful and wore beautiful clothes. And I remember being very jealous of everything that she was. But then I probably think I would have been jealous of her if she weren't necessarily as wealthy. So I think, if anything, because of the sort of privileged life that I've had and traveling and I think meeting a lot of people through work, you know, sort of doing interviews with very, very rich, famous people. When you interview lots of very famous people and you go to their homes and stuff, you know, they're obviously have everything that you could possibly want, but they are not often very happy people.
Yeah, of course. Now, we've had some more comments in from Telegraph readers on this topic, and I wanted to share a few more with you. Leah says, some people seem to make money so easily while others struggle most of their lives on low to medium salaries. What really gets me are the geeks who sit tapping away at a computer but are paid millions. For what? no one is worth that sort of money.
I totally agree with that. I've got a few friend geeks and I've known them since I was about 17 and I still don't understand what they do, but I know that they just earn sort of just vast, insane amounts of money. I'm jealous. I tell you what I am jealous of. With women, I'm jealous of the sort of value that it gives you to be earning that much money. Like I remember asking a lawyer friend of mine when we were drunk quite recently how much she was earning. And I knew it'd be a lot because she's a lawyer. But the sum that she told was just, I just could hardly speak.
What are we talking? Are we talking how?
450,000 a year.
Wow.
It wasn't so much jealousy of, oh, wow, think of the things that you can do with that. Because as I said, I'm obviously in a very lucky situation myself. I was very jealous of the fact that she was valued.
Yeah, and you know, she probably does feel very proud of herself, and good on her. But just going back to Leah's point as well, we did have a response from Ada on that point. And she said, people tapping up the computer have created programs that operate machines that saves lives in hospital, or machines that cure cancer and gave a second chance to families. The money is worth it when your work makes a positive impact. I think that's an interesting point as well. You know, jobs that seem to be easy actually are adding huge value to society. When I first read Leah's point, I was thinking of, you know, carers in care homes and people doing manual labour on minimum wage. It just doesn't seem fair, does it? It does make me angry to think of the wage disparity there. But I think Ada has a good point too.
It goes back to what we were saying, doesn't it? But I think, one thing we do know, certainly listening to Poppy's story, is that the financial mismanagement and losing control of your finances is sure to make you unhappy.
Absolutely. And finally, Celia, if you have a supportive message for Poppy, just to finish off with, what would that be?
I've known people personally who have got into huge amounts of debt and who have managed to get out of it. And I think with any form of, I'm not going to say addiction because I don't know her circumstances, but I think when something has got out of control, sometimes it really has to reach rock bottom or a moment that startles even you. And then somehow that does give you the impetus to find a new way of living and turn things around.
Thank you, Celia. I'm sure Poppy will appreciate your kind words and hopefully feel less alone in what she's going through. Hopefully Vicky and Claire's sage advice will push her forward in a more positive direction too. Particularly with the rise of social media, it's easier than ever to compare our lives to other people. And as we heard from Vicky Reynal, ADHD and its comorbidities can often be so misunderstood. So it was great to hear some practical money-saving tips and tools that helped Claire Seal overcome her debt. For me, I think one of the key takeaways from today's conversation, and it might seem obvious now, but I hadn't thought about it before, is that the key to controlling your financial envy is to get your own house in order first and then see how it looks like, because often the mess in our own head spills out into how we view others. What do you think about Poppy's story? Some of you might not sympathise, but some might. So be honest. Do you experience feelings of money jealousy or envy? Do you think that as a society, we're more obsessed than ever with material possessions? Let me know by emailing me directly or sending a voice note to moneyconfidential@telegraph.co.uk. I read every message. Next week, we delve into the age-old issue dividing households up and down the country. Private schools. They are hideously expensive, but are they even worth it? Would you relocate your whole family just to send your kids to an independent school? Well, we hear from a listener who did just that. And if you haven't already, please press follow on this podcast in your favourite podcast app so you don't miss an episode. And if you fancy, leave a nice rating and a review too. If you have a money dilemma you need solved and fancy me popping round for a cup of tea and a chat, email me at moneyconfidential@telegraph.co.uk or fill in the form in the podcast description below. It takes about 60 seconds and you can be totally anonymous. Thank you for listening to Money Confidential. You can find me on Instagram at moneybackmorley. Production support from Lillian Fawcett, and thank you so much to my producer Isabel Boujard and series producer Giles Gear. Bye for now, sausage.